The barn beam cracked like a gunshot. Ethan Vale froze, one hand still pressed against the rotting timber, the other reaching instinctively for his daughter. Mia stood 3 feet away, her small boots planted in snow that had already seeped through the floorboards. Above them, the entire roof structure groaned, a sound like something dying slowly. "Dad?" Mia's voice was small. Ethan didn't move. Couldn't. Because if this beam went, the whole west wall would follow, and they had maybe 5 seconds to get out. But that's getting ahead of the story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Ethan Vale learned about collapse the way most people learn about breathing, through repetition, through necessity, through the kind of intimate familiarity that comes only from watching something fall apart over and over again. At 32, he could read a building the way other men read faces, the way a door frame sat crooked in its casing, the specific angle of a sagging roofline, the smell of dry rot versus wet rot, versus the particular funk of mold eating through a century-old timber. He knew which cracks mattered and which ones were just cosmetic lies. Buildings told themselves while they died from the inside out. He'd been doing this for 9 years, structural restoration, historic preservation. Mostly it meant telling people their grandparents' barns couldn't be saved, their dream renovations would cost triple what they'd budgeted, and no, slapping some paint over water damage wouldn't fix the problem any more than makeup would fix a broken jaw. People didn't like him much, he was fine with that. The truck rattled over a pothole deep enough to swallow a tire, and Mia's head bounced against the window beside him. She didn't wake up. 8 years old, and she could sleep through anything. A skill she'd inherited from her mother, along with the dark hair and the way her nose wrinkled when she was thinking hard about something. Sarah had been gone for 3 years, cancer, fast, and mean. The kind that gave you just enough time to understand what was being taken and not nearly enough time to figure out how to say goodbye. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel and focused on the road. The job site was 40 minutes outside Alder Ridge, which meant it was basically nowhere. Montana in January was all white nothing and gray sky, the kind of landscape that made you feel like the only person left in the world. The GPS had given up 10 minutes ago, so he was navigating by landmarks now. The tilted mailbox, the fence line with the broken post, the turnoff marked by a rusted tractor that looked like it had been there since the Eisenhower administration. When he finally found the driveway, it was worse than he'd expected. A quarter-mile of mud and ice, rutted deep enough that the truck's undercarriage scraped twice before he even saw the property. The barn appeared first, a dark shape rising out of the snow like a shipwreck. Then the house, smaller, newer, but still old enough to have that worn-down look of a place that had survived a few hard decades. Ethan pulled up next to a black Range Rover that was so clean it looked like it had been teleported in from a different reality. He killed the engine and sat there for a second, studying the barn. "Oh, hell," he muttered. "Language," Mia said without opening her eyes. "You're supposed to be asleep." "You drive like you're mad at the road. It wakes me up." She unbuckled her seatbelt and squinted out the windshield. "Is that the barn?" "Yeah." It looked sad. It looked worse than sad. It looked like it was being held upright by habit and spite. The roofline sagged in the middle like a broken spine, and the entire west wall leaned outward at an angle that made Ethan's teeth hurt. Snow had piled up against the north side, which meant the foundation was probably compromised. Several of the boards were missing entirely, leaving gaps you could shove a fist through. "Can we fix it?" Mia asked. "I don't know yet. But you'll try?" Ethan looked at his daughter. She had her mother's optimism, which was both a gift and a problem. Sarah had believed things could be fixed right up until the moment the doctor told them they couldn't. Mia had been 5 then, too young to understand and old enough to remember. "I'll look at it," he said. "That's all I'm promising." They climbed out of the truck into air so cold it felt like breathing glass. Mia pulled her hood up and shoved her hands deep into her pockets. Ethan grabbed his tool bag from the bed and slung it over his shoulder. The front door of the house opened before they'd made it halfway across the yard. The woman who stepped out was not what he'd been expecting. Ethan had assumed, based on the voice on the phone, the urgency in the email, the general desperation that came through in every message, that he'd be dealing with someone older. A widow, maybe, or a retiree trying to hold on to a family property. Someone who'd lived here long enough to have an emotional attachment that outweighed common sense. This woman was maybe 30, tall, dark-haired, wearing jeans and work boots that had actual mud on them, no makeup, no jewelry except for a watch that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. She moved like someone who was used to being in charge, but there was something careful in the way she held herself, like she was trying not to take up too much space. "Mr. Vale?" she called out. "That's me." He closed the distance and offered his hand. "Ethan." Her grip was firm, her hand cold. "Vivian Cross. Thank you for coming out here. This is my daughter, Mia." Vivian looked down and her expression shifted into something warmer. "Hi, Mia." "Hi." Mia tilted her head, studying Vivian with the unself-conscious intensity of a kid who hadn't yet learned to pretend not to stare. "You have a really big car." "Mia," Ethan said. "It's okay." Vivian smiled and it changed her whole face. "I do have a really big car. It's terrible in the snow, but it has heated seats, which makes up for a lot." "Our truck doesn't have heated seats," Mia said. "Dad says they're a waste of money." "Dad says a lot of things," Ethan muttered. He looked at Vivian. "You want to show me the barn?" "Yes, please." She turned and started walking, and Ethan fell into step beside her. Mia trailed behind, dragging her boots through the snow in a way that would definitely result in wet socks later. "I should probably manage expectations right up front," Ethan said. "From what I can see, this is going to be expensive." "I know." "Like, more expensive than you're thinking. Even if you're thinking it's going to be expensive." Vivian glanced at him. "I appreciate the honesty. People usually don't." "Then you've been working for the wrong people." They reached the barn, and Ethan stopped in front of the main entrance, a set of double doors that had warped so badly they didn't close all the way anymore. He set his tool bag down and pulled out a flashlight, even though it was barely 3 in the afternoon. The clouds were low and heavy, turning the daylight into something gray and flat. "When was this built?" he asked. 1932, Vivian said. "My great-grandfather put it up with help from the neighbors. There's a photo of the barn raising somewhere in the house." "Original foundation?" "As far as I know." Ethan stepped closer and ran his hand along the doorframe. The wood was soft in places, spongy where water had gotten in and never dried out. He knocked on one of the support beams and listened to the sound it made. Dull, hollow. Not good. "How long has it been since anyone used this?" he asked. 5 years? Maybe 6? Vivian's voice went quieter. "My father got sick. Things kind of fell apart after that." Ethan didn't ask what kind of sick. It wasn't relevant to the structure, and he'd learned a long time ago that people's tragedies weren't his business unless they made them his business. "What's the plan for it?" he asked instead. "If we can save it." "Stable, community boarding, riding lessons, maybe therapy programs for kids." Vivian looked at the barn like she was seeing something he couldn't. "My dad always wanted to do something like that. He loved horses, loved this place. He just ran out of time." Ethan nodded. He understood running out of time. "All right," he said, "let's see how bad it is." He pulled the doors open, or tried to. They stuck halfway, scraping against the ground, and he had to put his shoulder into it to force them the rest of the way. The smell hit him immediately. Old hay, mouse droppings, mildew, and underneath it all, the sour, sweet stink of rot. The inside of the barn was worse than the outside. The roof had holes, not little ones, big ragged gaps where entire sections of shingles had blown off or fallen through. Snow had gotten in, melted, refrozen, melted again, soaking into the beams and the floorboards and turning everything soft. The hayloft sagged so badly, it looked like it might collapse if you sneezed at it wrong. "Jesus," Ethan said, and this time Mia didn't correct him. Vivian stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Can it be saved?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked the perimeter slowly, shining his flashlight into corners, testing boards with the toe of his boot, looking up at the roof structure and trying to calculate how much of it would need to be replaced versus reinforced. It was bad. Real bad. But it wasn't impossible. He hated that he was even thinking that. The smart thing, the professional thing, would be to tell her the truth, that this barn had maybe 2 good winters left in it before it came down on its own. that the cost of restoration would be astronomical, that she'd be better off tearing it down and building something new. But he didn't say that, because something about the way Vivian was standing there, waiting for his verdict, reminded him of the way Sarah used to wait for test results, hoping for the best, braced for the worst, trying not to let him see how scared she was. "It's going to be expensive," he said again. "You already said that." "I'm saying it again so you really hear me." He turned to face her. "We're talking a full roof replacement, new support beams, foundation work, probably new siding on at least 2 walls. The loft is a loss. We'd have to tear it out and rebuild. The floor needs reinforcing, and that's just what I can see right now. Once we start pulling things apart, we're going to find more problems. Okay? I'd need to bring in help. This isn't a one-person job. Okay? And it's going to take time, months, not weeks. Okay?" Ethan frowned. "You're not asking how much." "Because you don't know yet." Vivian met his eyes. "Right?" "Right. So tell me when you do know. In the meantime, can we at least start? Stop the bleeding, stabilize what we can, keep it from getting worse while we figure out the rest?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't try to fill the silence with nervous chatter the way most clients did. "Yeah," he said finally. "We can start." Relief flickered across her face, quick and bright, before she got it under control. "When?" "Give me a few days to line up materials and help. I'll come back early next week with a crew and we'll—" "Dad?" Ethan turned. Mia was standing near the back corner of the barn, half hidden in shadow, staring at something on the wall. "What is it, kiddo?" "There's writing here." Ethan walked over, Vivian right behind him. Mia was pointing at a section of wall where the paint had mostly flaked off. Underneath, carved into the wood in careful, deliberate letters, was a name and a date. J. Cross, 1932. "That's my great-grandfather," Vivian said softly. "James." Mia traced the letters with her finger. "He built this?" "He did." "Then we have to save it." Mia looked up at Ethan with absolute certainty. "Right, Dad?" Ethan sighed. He knew when he was beaten. "Right," he said. "But..." They spent another hour going through the barn, taking measurements, making notes, arguing about which parts could be salvaged and which parts were too far gone. Vivian asked good questions, not the kind of surface-level stuff most clients asked, but real questions about load-bearing walls and moisture barriers, and whether it made sense to try to match the original materials or go with something more modern. She wasn't just an owner writing checks. She wanted to understand. Ethan wasn't sure what to do with that. By the time they finished, the light was starting to fade, and the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Mia's lips were turning blue despite her coat, and Ethan's fingers were numb inside his gloves. "Come up to the house," Vivian said. "I'll make coffee." "We should get going. It's a 40-minute drive and it's going to be dark in 20 minutes. At least warm up first." Ethan hesitated. He didn't like being in other people's houses. Didn't like the forced intimacy of sitting at someone's kitchen table, drinking their coffee, making small talk. But Mia was shivering, and he was cold enough that his jaw ached, and Vivian was already walking toward the house like the decision had been made. The inside of the house was warmer, but not by much. The furniture was old, but well made, the kind of stuff that lasted forever, because it had been built back when people still cared about that. There were photos on the walls, family pictures mostly, spanning decades. Ethan recognized a younger version of Vivian in several of them, always standing next to a tall man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. Her father, probably. Vivian disappeared into the kitchen, and Ethan heard the sound of a coffee maker starting up. Mia wandered over to the fireplace, where a few framed photos sat on the mantel. "Is this you?" she called out. "Probably," Vivian called back. "Which one?" "The one with the horse." Vivian came back into the room carrying 2 mugs and a juice box. She handed the juice box to Mia and set the mugs on the coffee table. "Yeah, that's me. I was maybe 10 in that picture." "You look happy." "I was. That was my horse, Cinnamon. She was old and stubborn and perfect." Mia studied the photo for another moment, then turned to Vivian. "Do you still have horses?" "Not yet. That's why I'm fixing the barn." "So you can have horses again?" "So other people can have horses. Kids who don't have a place to ride, people who want to learn, that kind of thing. Vivian sat down on the couch and wrapped her hands around her mug. My dad always talked about doing something like that. I'm just trying to finish what he started. Ethan picked up his coffee and took a sip. It was good, better than the gas station sludge he usually drank. He sat down in the chair across from Vivian and watched Mia explore the room, picking up small objects and putting them down, asking questions about everything. She's curious, Vivian said. That's one word for it. It's a good thing. Curious kids grow up to be interesting adults. Curious kids also grow up to be adults who ask a lot of inconvenient questions. Vivian smiled. Speaking from experience? I was a nightmare, Ethan admitted. Took apart every clock in the house trying to figure out how they worked. Drove my parents crazy. Did you figure it out? Eventually. Didn't make me any better at putting them back together, though. They sat in comfortable silence for a minute, drinking coffee, listening to Mia hum to herself as she examined a collection of old books on a shelf. Can I ask you something? Vivian said. Sure. Why'd you take this job? You could have said no. It would have been easier. Ethan considered the question. He could give her the easy answer, the professional one. Say something about enjoying a challenge, about wanting to preserve history, about how every project taught him something new. But that wasn't really why. My daughter thinks things can be fixed, he said finally. I don't want to be the one who teaches her they can't. Vivian looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. That's a good reason. It's a terrible reason. It's going to cost you a fortune, and there's no guarantee it'll work. Some things are worth the risk. Before Ethan could respond, Mia appeared at his elbow. Dad, can we come back? We will. I just told Ms. Cross we'd start next week. No, I mean, can we come back and help? Like, actually help? Ethan opened his mouth to say no, that construction sites weren't playgrounds, that she had school and he had work, and there were 1,000 reasons why that was a bad idea. But then he looked at Vivian, who was watching Mia with the kind of expression people got when they were remembering what it felt like to believe in something completely. We'll see, he said, which was as close to yes as he ever got. They drove home in the dark, the truck's headlights cutting through snow that had started falling again. Mia fell asleep before they hit the main road, her head tilted against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A text from Marcus, his usual crew chief, asking about the job. How bad? Ethan thought about the sagging roof, the rotting beams, the foundation that was probably cracked in 6 places. Bad, he typed back. But we're doing it anyway. Marcus sent back a string of question marks, but Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy thinking about the way Vivian had looked at that barn, like it was something worth saving, like it mattered. He hadn't felt that way about a project in a long time, maybe ever. The snow came down harder, and Ethan leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The road was a white blur, the world narrowed down to the 20 feet of visibility his headlights provided. He should have left earlier, should have said no to the coffee, should have done a lot of things differently, but he hadn't. And now he was driving home through a snowstorm, his daughter asleep beside him, already mentally cataloging everything that needed to happen before they could even think about starting the real work. Materials, permits, crew schedules, equipment rentals, structural engineering consults. He'd need to bring in someone to assess the foundation properly, maybe get a soil test done to see if they were dealing with settling or something worse. It was going to be a mess. It was going to be expensive. It was going to take everything he had. He was actually kind of looking forward to it. When they finally pulled into the driveway of their house, a small ranch-style place on the edge of Alder Ridge that Ethan had bought because it was cheap and structurally sound and close to Mia's school, the dashboard clock read 7:43 p.m. Mia woke up when he cut the engine, blinking slowly in the sudden silence. We home? She mumbled. We're home. I'm hungry. I'll make dinner. Can we have pancakes? It's nighttime. Pancakes don't know what time it is. Ethan laughed despite himself. Fine. Pancakes. They trudged through the snow to the front door and Ethan fumbled with his keys, his fingers still half numb from the cold. Inside, the house was warm and dark, and exactly the way they'd left it that morning. Dishes in the sink, Mia's backpack on the floor. The kind of low-level chaos that came from two people who were just trying to get through the day without falling apart. Mia disappeared into her room to change into pajamas, and Ethan headed for the kitchen. He pulled out the pancake mix, eggs, milk, a frying pan that had seen better days, turned on the stove, cracked eggs into a bowl, and whisked them together with the kind of automatic precision that came from having made this meal 100 times before. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "You need me to pull permits? Yeah, I'll send you the address. When do we start?" Ethan paused, spatula in hand, staring at the half-cooked pancake in the pan. "Monday," he typed. "Early." "You're insane." "Probably." He flipped the pancake, watched the bubbles pop and hiss, thought about Vivian standing in that barn, looking at a building that should have been torn down years ago and seeing possibility instead of failure. Yeah, he was definitely insane, but maybe that wasn't the worst thing in the world. Monday morning arrived cold and mean, the kind of morning that made you question every decision that had led you to standing outside in 15-degree weather before the sun was even up. Ethan pulled into the property at 6:30, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus's truck was already there, exhaust puffing white into the frozen air. Two other vehicles sat beside it. Danny's beat-up Ford and a newer Chevy that belonged to Kyle, a kid fresh out of trade school who was good with his hands and kept his mouth shut, which made him better than half the people Ethan had worked with over the years. The barn looked worse in the morning light somehow, more fragile, like it had spent the night barely holding itself together and wasn't sure it had the energy to make it through another day. Ethan killed the engine and sat there for a second, hands still on the wheel, second-guessing everything. This was stupid. The smart play would have been to walk away, let someone else deal with this money pit, find a job that made sense, instead of one that felt like trying to save something that didn't want to be saved. But then the front door of the house opened and Vivian stepped out, already dressed for work in jeans and a canvas jacket, carrying two thermoses that were probably full of coffee, and Ethan realized he'd stopped thinking about the smart play somewhere around the time she'd asked if they could at least try. He grabbed his tool bag and climbed out. Marcus met him halfway across the yard. 52 years old, built like a fire hydrant, with a gray beard and the permanent squint of someone who'd spent 30 years staring at things that were about to fall down. "You're out of your mind," Marcus said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you, too. I looked at the photos you sent. This place should be condemned, not restored." "Noted." "I'm serious, Ethan. The foundation alone is going to be a nightmare." "Then it's a good thing I'm paying you extra." Marcus grunted, which was as close to agreement as he ever got. "Where's the owner?" "Coming over." Ethan nodded toward Vivian, who was crossing the yard with the thermoses. "Try to be nice." "I'm always nice." "You told the last client her house was held together by paint and prayers." "It was. And I was right." Vivian reached them and held out one of the thermoses. "Coffee. I didn't know how many people you'd have, so I made a lot." Marcus took it, unscrewed the cap, and took a cautious sip. His eyebrows went up. "That's good coffee." "Thanks. There's cream and sugar in the house if anyone wants it." "We're good." Marcus looked her up and down, taking in the work clothes, the boots. "You planning to stick around?" "If that's okay." "It's your property, but if you're staying, you follow instructions and you don't touch anything unless someone tells you to. Deal?" Vivian didn't flinch at the gruffness. "Deal." Danny and Kyle wandered over, introduced themselves, grabbed coffee. Danny was 40-something, skinny as a rail, with hands that never stopped moving. Kyle was barely 25, all nervous energy and eagerness to prove himself. They stood in a loose circle in the freezing cold, breath steaming, while Ethan laid out the plan. "First priority is the roof. We need to get it weatherproof before the next storm hits, which, according to the forecast, is Thursday. That gives us 3 days. 3 days to re-roof a barn this size?" Danny shook his head. "You're optimistic." "I didn't say we'd finish it. I said we'd get it weatherproof. We patch what we can, reinforce the structure, get a tarp over the worst sections. Then we can take our time with the real work." "What about the west wall?" Marcus asked. "We shore it up today. I don't trust it not to come down on its own." Ethan looked at Vivian. "You got power out here?" "Generator. I can get it running." "Do that. We're going to need lights and somewhere to plug in tools." He turned back to the crew. "Questions?" No one said anything. "All right. Let's get to work. The next 3 hours were a blur of noise and motion and the particular rhythm that came from people who knew what they were doing working together without needing to talk much. Marcus and Danny tackled the west wall, bracing it with temporary supports while they assessed the damage. Kyle started pulling off damaged shingles, working his way across the roof section by section. Ethan went after the support beams, testing each one, marking the ones that would need to be replaced, calculating loads and stress points in his head. Vivian worked alongside them without complaint. She hauled lumber, held boards steady while Marcus cut them, fetched tools when someone called out for them. She didn't try to insert herself into conversations or prove she knew things she didn't. She just worked, steady and quiet, the kind of presence that made things easier instead of harder. Around 9:30, Kyle called down from the roof. "Hey, Ethan, you're going to want to see this." Ethan climbed the ladder, his knees protesting the cold and the angle. Kyle was crouched near the peak, holding a rotten board that had crumbled in his hands. "The whole section here is gone," Kyle said. "It's not even holding weight anymore. It's just kind of sitting here pretending to be a roof." Ethan leaned in, shining his flashlight into the gap. Snow and water damage had eaten through the sheathing, leaving nothing but skeleton. He could see straight down into the barn below, where Vivian was stacking scrap wood. "Yeah," he said, "that's not good." "Can we fix it?" "We can fix anything. Question is whether we should." Ethan sat back on his heels, doing math in his head. Materials, labor, time. The number that came out the other end made his stomach hurt. "We're going to need more plywood than I thought, and probably another set of hands." "I can call my brother," Kyle offered. "He's between jobs right now." "He any good?" "He's better than me." "That's not a high bar, kid." Kyle grinned. "He's cheaper than me, too." "Call him." By lunch, they'd made progress. Not enough, but some. The west wall was stabilized, at least temporarily. Half the damaged shingles were off, exposing the rot underneath so they could see what they were really dealing with. The generator was running, feeding power to a space heater that was doing absolutely nothing to combat the cold, but made everyone feel slightly better anyway. Vivian disappeared into the house and came back with sandwiches and more coffee. They ate standing up in the barn, too cold to sit, too tired to care much about the food. "This used to be beautiful," Vivian said quietly, looking up at the exposed beams. "My dad had pictures of it when it was new. The wood was so clean you could see the grain from across the room." "It can be again," Ethan said. "It's going to take time, but the bones are good. Solid oak, most of it. They don't make them like this anymore." "Because it's too expensive?" "Because it's too slow. This barn took 6 months to build. You can put up a prefab metal building in 6 days now." He ran his hand along one of the beams, feeling the texture of the wood under his palm. "But it won't last 90 years. "Do you think this will last another 90? "If we do it right?" "Yeah, I do." Vivian looked at him, and there was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. Relief, maybe, or hope, or the kind of exhausted gratitude people felt when someone finally told them the truth instead of what they wanted to hear. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see the bill." She almost smiled. "Fair enough." They worked until dark, which came early and fast in January. By the time Ethan called it, his hands were numb, his back ached, and he was pretty sure he'd inhaled enough dust to qualify as a building material himself. Marcus packed up his tools with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yeah, bring extra tarps if you've got them. We're going to need them." Danny and Kyle headed out, their trucks kicking up gravel as they disappeared down the driveway. Marcus lingered, watching Vivian carry tools back toward the house. "She's not what I expected," he said. "What'd you expect?" "I don't know. Someone softer. Someone who'd spend the day in the house making phone calls and complaining about the noise. She grew up here. She knows how to work. She know how much this is going to cost?" "Not yet." Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're going to have to tell her eventually." "I know. And she's going to have to decide if it's worth it." "I know that too." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, hard enough to hurt. "You're a good guy, Ethan. Too good for this business, probably. But you're going to get your heart broken if you're not careful." "It's a job, Marcus." "Sure it is." Marcus walked away, shaking his head. Ethan stood alone in the gathering dark, looking at the barn. It didn't look better. If anything, it looked worse. half stripped, exposed, raw in a way that made all its weaknesses visible. But that was how it went sometimes. Things had to get worse before they could get better. You had to break them open to see what was really wrong, and then you had to decide if you had the stomach to fix it. He was still standing there when Vivian came back out. "Your crew's good," she said. "They're the best I know. Marcus is kind of terrifying. He grows on you." "Like mold?" Ethan laughed, surprised. "Yeah, like mold." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the barn. The wind had picked up, rattling the loose boards, making the whole structure groan. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian said. "Sure." "Do you think I'm crazy, trying to save this?" Ethan considered the question. He could lie, tell her it was a great investment, a smart business decision, but she'd asked for honesty, and he owed her that much. "Yeah," he said, "but crazy isn't always bad. Some of the best things I've ever worked on were crazy ideas that shouldn't have worked." "Did they work?" "Some of them. And the ones that didn't? They taught me something." Vivian nodded slowly. "My father used to say that the only real failure was not trying. I always thought that was kind of a cop-out, like something people said to make themselves feel better about bad decisions. And now? Now I think maybe he was right, or at least right enough." She looked at him. "I spent 6 years in New York working jobs I hated, living in apartments that cost more than this property is worth, trying to prove to myself that I didn't need this place, that I could be someone different than who my parents raised me to be. How'd that work out? Turns out I'm terrible at being someone else." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, here I am, back where I started, trying to fix something that's probably beyond fixing, because I don't know what else to do." "It's not beyond fixing. You said it was going to be expensive." "It is, but that's not the same thing as impossible." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" The wind gusted again, colder now, and Vivian pulled her jacket tighter. "You should get home. It's getting late." "Yeah." But Ethan didn't move. There was something about the way she was standing there, arms wrapped around herself against the cold, looking at that barn like it was the only thing holding her together, that made him want to stay, to say something helpful or comforting or true. But he didn't know what that would be, so he just said, "See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." He walked to his truck, threw his tool bag in the back, climbed into the cab. The engine coughed twice before turning over. He let it warm up for a minute, watching Vivian in the rearview mirror. She was still standing there, staring at the barn, alone in the dark. Ethan put the truck in gear and drove away, but he couldn't shake the image. It followed him all the way home, nagging at him like a splinter under the skin. The next day was worse. The forecast had lied. The storm showed up Wednesday instead of Thursday, rolling in around noon with wind that turned the snow horizontal and temperatures that dropped so fast Ethan's coffee froze in his mug while he was drinking it. They kept working anyway, because stopping meant falling behind. And falling behind meant the roof wouldn't be weatherproof before the real weather hit. Kyle's brother shows up, a stocky guy named Aaron, who didn't talk much but could swing a hammer like he was born doing it. Together, they managed to get most of the south-facing roof section patched before the visibility got so bad they couldn't see the ladder from the ground. "That's it," Ethan called out. "Everyone down. We're done for the day." "We're not finished," Kyle protested, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We're finished enough. I'm not scraping anyone off the ground because they fell through a roof in a whiteout. Pack it up." They retreated to the barn, shaking snow off like wet dogs. The space heater was running full blast, and it still felt like working inside a freezer. Marcus was trying to secure a tarp over the section of roof they hadn't gotten to yet, swearing steadily under his breath. "Need help?" Ethan asked. "I need this wind to calm down. But since that's not happening, yeah, grab that corner." They worked together, fighting the wind for every inch, until finally the tarp was secured and they could step back, breathing hard. "That'll hold for tonight," Marcus said. "Maybe. It'll hold." "You don't know that." "I'm choosing to believe it anyway." Vivian came in carrying a cardboard box filled with hand warmers. "I found these in the basement. They're probably expired, but they might still work." "You're a saint," Danny said, grabbing two. "I'm really not. but she smiled anyway, handing them out. They stood in a rough circle, trying to warm up, listening to the wind scream outside. It sounded like something alive, something angry, battering itself against the walls. "This storm's not supposed to let up until tomorrow afternoon," Aaron said, checking his phone. "Then we'll come back Thursday," Ethan said. "You sure that's a good idea? If this wind keeps up, that tarp's not going to last the night." "Then we'll fix it Thursday." "Or we could try to reinforce it now," Kyle suggested. Ethan looked at him. "In this? It's just wind. It's 40-mile-an-hour wind with a wind chill that'll give you frostbite in 10 minutes. We're not risking it." Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ethan's expression stopped him. They finished packing up in silence, everyone moving a little slower than usual, reluctant to leave the questionable shelter of the barn for the guaranteed misery of the storm outside. When Ethan finally made it to his truck, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive home was a nightmare. White knuckles, whiteout conditions, and the constant fear that he was about to slide off the road into a ditch. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he sat there for a full minute, just breathing, letting the adrenaline drain away. Inside, Mia was at the kitchen table doing homework, and Mrs. Chen from next door was making something that smelled like soup. "You look half frozen," Mrs. Chen said. "I feel half frozen." "Go take a hot shower. I'll keep an eye on dinner." Ethan didn't argue. He stood underwater hot enough to hurt until his fingers stopped being numb and his teeth stopped chattering. When he came back out, Mia had abandoned her homework in favor of watching the storm through the window. "Is Miss Cross's barn okay?" she asked. "For now." "Well, what if the storm breaks it? Then we'll fix it again. What if it's too broken to fix?" Ethan sat down beside her, watching the snow pile up against the glass. "Then we'll figure something else out. But we're not there yet." "Do you like her?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "Ms. Cross. Do you like her?" "She's a client, Mia." "That's not what I asked." Ethan looked at his daughter, 8 years old and already too smart for her own good. "She seems nice." "She's nice. And she's pretty." "I hadn't noticed." "Dad, you're not blind." "I'm also not having this conversation with my 8-year-old daughter." Mia grinned, the same grin Sarah used to give him when she knew she'd won an argument. "Okay, but I'm just saying, you could do worse. Go finish your homework. It's already done. Then go find something else to do." "Fine." She hopped off the chair and headed toward her room, then paused in the doorway. "But I still think you should ask her out." "Mia, I'm just saying." She disappeared into her room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and a bowl of soup he didn't remember Mrs. Chen putting in front of him. He pulled out his phone, stared at it for a moment, then typed out a text to Vivian. "Storm's supposed to clear tomorrow afternoon. We'll be back Thursday morning to assess damage." He hit send before he could second-guess it. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Thank you. Stay safe." He set the phone down, picked up his spoon, tried to focus on the soup, but his mind kept drifting back to the barn, to the way it had looked half-finished and vulnerable in the storm, and to Vivian standing in the dark, holding herself together by sheer force of will. "Some things are worth the risk," she'd said. Yeah, maybe they were. Thursday morning dawned clear and brutally cold, the kind of cold that made the air feel solid. Ethan drove out to the property alone this time, wanting to assess the damage before bringing the crew back. The driveway was buried under 2 feet of snow. He almost got stuck twice before making it to the yard. When he finally saw the barn, his heart sank. The tarp had held. Barely. But the west wall, the one they'd spent 2 days bracing, had buckled. Not collapsed, not completely, but shifted inward at an angle that made Ethan's stomach drop. He was standing there trying to figure out how bad it was when Vivian's Range Rover pulled up beside his truck. She got out, took one look at the wall, and said, "Oh, yeah. Can we fix it?" "I don't know yet. I need to get inside, see how much of the structure is compromised." "Do you need help?" "I need you to stay back until I know it's safe." For a second, he thought she was going to argue, but then she nodded and stepped away, arms crossed, watching as he approached the barn. The doors were frozen shut. Ethan had to kick them 3 times before they gave way, groaning open to reveal a nightmare. Snow had gotten in through gaps in the roof, covering everything in a fine white powder. The temperature inside was barely warmer than outside. And the west wall was leaning so far inward that Ethan could see daylight through cracks that hadn't been there 2 days ago. He stood very, very still, barely breathing, listening. The barn creaked, settled, the sound of wood under stress, deciding whether it was going to hold or let go. Ethan took one careful step forward, then another, moving slowly, testing each board before putting his full weight on it. He was halfway to the wall when he heard it, a crack, sharp and sudden, like a gunshot. He froze, looked up. The main support beam directly above him had a fracture running down its length. As he watched, it spread, just a fraction of an inch, but enough. Enough to know that this beam wasn't going to hold much longer. "Ethan?" Vivian's voice from the doorway. "You okay? Don't come in." His voice was calm, even though his heart was trying to punch its way out of his chest. "Stay where you are." "What's wrong?" "Just stay there." He took a step backward, slow, careful, not looking away from the beam. Another crack. Louder this time. Ethan moved faster, still trying to be careful but running out of time. He made it 5 steps, 6, almost to the door. The beam gave way with a sound like the world breaking in half. Ethan lunged for the doorway, and Vivian grabbed his arm, yanking him through as the beam crashed down behind him. It hit the floor with enough force to shake the whole structure, sending up a cloud of dust and snow and 100-year-old debris. They stumbled backward into the yard, and Ethan bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. "Are you okay?" Vivian's hands were on his shoulders, her face pale. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. I'm okay." "That was insane. You could have been killed, but I wasn't. That's not the point." Ethan straightened up, looked at her. She was furious and terrified in equal measure, and her hands were shaking. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry. That was stupid." "It was really stupid. I know." They stood there for a moment, both breathing hard, staring at each other. Then Vivian's expression shifted, the anger draining away to leave something rawer behind. "I can't lose this," she said quietly. "I know it's just a building. I know it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But it's all I have left of him, and I can't lose it." "You're not going to lose it. You don't know that." "No, but I know we're not giving up." Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, sharp. "Okay. So what do we do now?" Ethan looked back at the barn, at the collapsed beam, the damaged wall, the roof that was barely holding on. What they should do was walk away, admit defeat, tell her the storm had done too much damage, that it wasn't safe to continue, that some things couldn't be saved. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "We've got a problem," he said when Marcus answered. "A big one. I'm going to need everyone out here, and we're going to need more than 3 days this time." Marcus showed up an hour later with Danny and both of Kyle's brothers. They stood in a semicircle in front of the barn, nobody saying much, just looking at the damage like it was a body at a funeral. "Well," Marcus said finally, "that's not ideal." "No kidding," Danny muttered. Ethan had spent the hour doing calculations, measurements, trying to figure out if this was still salvageable or if they'd crossed some invisible line into territory where stubbornness became stupidity. The numbers weren't good. The collapsed beam had taken out part of the support structure. The west wall would need to be completely rebuilt, not just reinforced. And the roof was now actively dangerous, not just in bad shape. "How much are we talking?" Vivian asked. She'd been quiet since the crew arrived, standing off to the side with her hands shoved deep in her pockets. Ethan didn't want to answer. He'd been dreading this conversation since the moment that beam came down. "More," he said. "How much more?" "Maybe double what I originally estimated. Maybe more than that." He watched her face, waiting for the moment when reality would hit, and she'd realize this wasn't worth it. That no barn, no matter how much history it held, was worth this kind of money and risk. But that moment didn't come. Instead, Vivian just nodded slowly and said, "Okay. Okay. We keep going. What choice do I have?" "You could walk away," Marcus said, not unkindly. "Cut your losses. Nobody would blame you." "I'd blame me." Vivian looked at the barn, then back at them. My father spent his whole life building something here. I'm not going to let one storm take it away. So tell me what we need to do." Marcus glanced at Ethan, eyebrows raised. Ethan just shrugged. He'd stopped trying to talk clients out of bad decisions years ago. If she wanted to throw money at this problem, that was her business. "All right," Marcus said, "but we do this right. No more half measures, no more patch jobs. We tear out everything that's compromised and rebuild it properly." "How long?" 6 weeks, maybe 8. Depends on weather and how much other damage we find once we start pulling things apart. "And the cost?" Ethan pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app where he'd been running numbers. "Rough estimate? 70,000. Could go higher." He waited for her to flinch, to ask for time to think about it, to say anything other than what she actually said. "When can you start?" The crew worked through the weekend. They pulled out the collapsed beam, braced the remaining structure with temporary supports, started the process of dismantling the west wall board by board. It was slow, careful work, the kind that couldn't be rushed without risking another collapse. Ethan brought Mia with him on Saturday. She'd been asking every night when she could come back, and he'd run out of excuses. Besides, Mrs. Chen had plans, and his backup babysitter was out of town, and he couldn't afford to miss a day. Mia spent the morning exploring the property, staying well clear of the barn like he'd told her to, poking around the outbuildings and the old chicken coop that hadn't housed chickens in probably 20 years. Around noon, she came back dragging a branch she'd found somewhere, using it as a walking stick. "Can I help?" she asked. "Not with the barn, too dangerous." "Then can I help Ms. Cross? She's cleaning out the tack room." Ethan looked over to where Vivian was hauling boxes out of a small building adjacent to the barn. He should probably say no, should keep Mia close where he could see her, but Vivian caught his eye and gave a small nod, and something about that made him relent. "Fine, but you do exactly what she tells you, no wandering off." "I won't. And if anything feels unsafe, you come get me immediately." "I know, Dad." She ran off before he could add more rules to the list. Ethan watched her go, that familiar tightness in his chest that came from letting his daughter out of arm's reach. Sarah used to tell him he was too protective, that kids needed space to figure things out on their own. But Sarah had never had to raise a daughter alone, never had to carry the weight of being the only thing standing between a kid and the world. "She'll be fine," Marcus said, coming up beside him. "Vivian's not going to let anything happen to her." "I know. So why do you look like you're about to have a heart attack?" "Because that's my default state." Marcus snorted. "You should relax more. Maybe ask that woman to dinner." "Not you too." "What?" "Mia's been on me all week about the same thing." "Smart kid." Marcus picked up his circular saw, checked the blade. "You could do worse, you know. She's steady. Doesn't panic when things go wrong. Works hard. That's more than you can say for most people." "She's a client. She won't be forever. Job's got to end sometime." "Not if we keep finding new problems." "There's a thought. Sabotage your own work just to keep seeing her." Marcus grinned. "I'm kidding. Don't do that. That's fraud." Ethan shook his head and went back to work, but Marcus's words stuck with him. The truth was, he'd been thinking about Vivian more than he probably should, not in any way that felt appropriate or smart, but in that annoying way thoughts had of showing up uninvited. The way she'd pulled him out of the barn when that beam fell. The way she'd asked if he was married in the farmhouse kitchen, careful and direct at the same time. The way she looked at this broken-down property like it was something worth fighting for. He didn't have time for that kind of thinking, didn't have room in his life for complications. But the thought showed up anyway, stubborn as weeds. By late afternoon, they'd made enough progress that Ethan felt comfortable calling it for the day. The wall was down to the studs, the damaged sections removed and stacked for disposal. Tomorrow, they could start rebuilding. He found Mia and Vivian in the tack room, surrounded by boxes and old equipment. Mia was sitting cross-legged on the floor, polishing something that might have been a bridle once upon a time. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Good," Vivian said. "Your daughter's thorough. She gets that from her mother." "I found so much cool stuff," Mia said, holding up the bridle. "Look at this. Ms. Cross says it's from when her dad was little." "It's probably garbage by now," Vivian said, but she was smiling. "Most of this hasn't been touched in years." "It's not garbage. It's history. Mia set the bridle down carefully and picked up something else, a faded photograph in a cracked frame. "Who's this?" Vivian took the photo, and her expression shifted into something softer. "That's my dad, and that's me when I was about your age." Ethan moved closer, looking over her shoulder. The photo showed a younger version of Vivian sitting on a horse, grinning at the camera, while a tall man stood beside her with his hand on the horse's neck. The barn in the background looked pristine, freshly painted, roof straight, the kind of structure that looked like it would stand forever. "You look happy," Mia said. "I was. That was Cinnamon. Best horse I ever had." Vivian traced her finger along the edge of the frame. "She died the year I left for college. I always felt bad about that, like I'd abandoned her or something." "You didn't abandon her," Mia said with the absolute certainty of someone who knew nothing about the situation but believed it anyway. "You were just growing up. That's not the same thing." Vivian looked at her, surprised. "You're pretty smart for 8. "I know." Ethan cleared his throat. "We should get going. It's getting dark." They packed up Mia's things, her coat, her backpack, the stick she'd found that she insisted on bringing home. Vivian walked them to the truck, her breath visible in the cold air. "Thank you for letting her help," Ethan said. "She had fun. She's good company, better than most adults I know." Vivian looked at Mia, who was already buckled in and playing with something on her phone. "You're lucky." "I know." There was a pause, the kind that felt like someone should say something, but neither of them knew what. Vivian broke it first. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "Sure." "Are you—" She stopped, started again. "Earlier, you mentioned Mia's mother, past tense. She died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "It's okay. It was cancer. Fast kind. 6 months from diagnosis to—" He trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "That must have been hard. On both of you." "It was. Still is some days." Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets, looking anywhere but at her. "But we're managing, taking it one day at a time like they tell you to." Vivian nodded. "My mom died when I was 17. Car accident. One day she was here, next day she wasn't. I don't think I really processed it until years later." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." She was quiet for a moment. "It's strange, isn't it? How you can lose someone and the world just keeps going like nothing happened. Like it should stop or at least slow down, but it doesn't." "Yeah," Ethan said, because there wasn't really anything else to say. They stood in the gathering dark, two people who understood loss in the specific way you could only understand it by living through it. "Anyway," Vivian said, breaking the moment, "I should let you go. Thanks again for today. See you Monday." "See you Monday." Ethan climbed into the truck, started the engine, pulled away. In the rearview mirror, he could see Vivian standing in the driveway, watching them leave. Then she turned and walked back toward the house, and the darkness swallowed her up. "Do you like her?" Mia asked. Ethan nearly drove off the road. "What?" "Ms. Cross. Do you like her?" "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because it's obvious." "It's not obvious. There's nothing to be obvious about." "Dad, I'm 8, not stupid." Ethan gripped the steering wheel harder. "She's nice. I like her fine. As a client." "She asked about Mom." "I know." "That means she's interested. Or it means she was making conversation." "Nobody asks about dead people to make conversation. That's weird." "Mia, I'm just saying, if you wanted to ask her out, I'd be okay with it." Ethan pulled over, put the truck in park, turned to look at his daughter, who was watching him with an expression that was way too knowing for someone who still believed in the tooth fairy. "Listen to me," he said carefully. She was everything, you know that, and nobody's ever going to replace her. Not ever." "I know that. So if you think I'm going to just—" "Dad, I'm not asking you to replace her. I'm saying maybe it's okay to like someone, that's all." Mia's voice was smaller now, less certain. "You're sad a lot. You try to hide it, but I can tell. And you were less sad today. When we were there." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, the kind of thing he'd spent 3 years keeping sealed tight. "I'm not sad. I'm fine." You're not fine. But that's okay. I'm not fine either. She picked at the edge of her seatbelt. I just think maybe we could both be less not fine, if we wanted to be. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain to his 8-year-old daughter that grief wasn't something you just decided to feel less of. That missing someone didn't work like that. That he'd built his whole life around taking care of her and keeping things steady, and letting someone else in felt like inviting chaos. But before he could figure out how to say any of that, Mia yawned and said, "Can we get pizza for dinner?" And just like that, the moment was over. "Yeah," Ethan said, "we can get pizza." He pulled back onto the road, and they drove the rest of the way in silence. The next week was brutal. The temperature dropped so low that the diesel in Danny's truck gelled, and they had to spend an hour thawing it out before they could even start work. Kyle's younger brother quit after 2 days, saying the job wasn't worth frostbite. And on Wednesday, the bank assessor showed up unannounced, took one look at the construction site, and told Vivian that the property's value had dropped by 40%. Ethan was inside the barn when he heard the shouting. He came out to find Vivian standing in the driveway, arms crossed, facing down a man in a suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Telling you it's not finished yet," Vivian was saying, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "You can't assess the value when we're in the middle of restoration." "Ma'am, I'm just reporting what I see. The structure is currently unsafe. There's been significant storm damage, and you've got at least 2 months of work ahead of you. That affects the property value. By 40%, that's insane." "That's the market." The assessor pulled out a tablet, tapped something on the screen. "Look, I understand this is frustrating, but the bank needs accurate numbers, and right now those numbers don't look good." "What does that mean for the loan?" "It means they're going to want to revisit the terms, possibly require additional collateral." Vivian went very still. "I don't have additional collateral. This is it. This property is all I have." The assessor had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Then I'd suggest talking to them sooner rather than later. Work something out before they make the decision for you." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving Vivian standing alone in the driveway. Ethan watched her for a moment, debating whether to approach or give her space. Before he could decide, she turned and walked toward the house, her shoulders tight, her pace just a little too fast. He gave her 10 minutes, then followed. She was in the kitchen, staring at a laptop screen, her jaw clenched so hard he could see the muscle jumping. Papers were spread across the table. Bank statements, loan documents, spreadsheets covered in numbers that probably told a story Ethan didn't want to hear. "Hey," he said from the doorway. She looked up, and for just a second, he saw how exhausted she was. Then she blinked, and the professional mask came back. "Hey, sorry about that scene out there." "Nothing to apologize for. He was being a jerk. He was doing his job." Vivian closed the laptop and rubbed her eyes. "And he's right. The numbers are bad." "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm not sure I can keep making payments if they change the terms, which they will." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's funny? I've got money, real money, but it's all tied up in trusts and investments and legal frameworks my father set up to keep me from doing anything stupid with it." "Like saving a barn?" "Like saving a barn." She stood up, started pacing. "I can access some of it, but not enough. Not fast enough. And if I liquidate the wrong things, I'll tank my own portfolio and end up worse off than when I started." Ethan leaned against the door frame, watching her move. "What about the trust managers? Can they help?" "They think I'm insane. They've been telling me to sell this place since my dad died." She stopped pacing, looked at him. "Maybe they're right. Maybe this is insane." "It's not insane." "Ethan, I'm about to lose everything trying to save a building that might not even be salvageable. How is that not insane?" "Because it matters to you, because you're fighting for something you believe in. That's not insane. That's just hard." Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, and before he realized what was happening, she was hugging him, tight and desperate and shaking slightly. Ethan froze. He hadn't been this close to another person in 3 years, hadn't let himself be. It felt wrong and necessary at the same time, like breaking a rule he'd made to protect himself. Slowly, carefully, he put his arms around her and hugged her back, They stood like that for maybe 15 seconds. Then Vivian pulled away, wiping at her eyes quickly. Sorry, sorry. It's okay. I don't usually fall apart on people. You're not falling apart. You're just overwhelmed. There's a difference. She laughed wetly. Is there? Yeah. Falling apart is when you give up. You haven't done that yet. Give me time. Outside, someone started up a saw, the sound cutting through the quiet. Vivian winced and moved to close the window, blocking out some of the noise. How much more time do you need? She asked. For the barn, realistically. 6 weeks if everything goes right, 10 if it doesn't. And the cost? Final number? Ethan hesitated. He'd been running the numbers all week, and they kept getting worse. 90,000, maybe 100. Vivian closed her eyes. I don't have that. Not liquid. Not without selling things I can't sell. Then we scale back. Do the essential repairs, skip the cosmetic stuff, get it functional instead of perfect. How much would that save? Maybe 20,000, but it won't look the way you want it to. I don't care what it looks like. I just need it standing. She opened her eyes, looked at him. Can we do that? The bare minimum to make it safe and functional? Yeah, we can do that. Then that's what we do. Ethan nodded, already recalculating in his head. Cheaper materials, less finish work. They'd have to cut corners without actually cutting corners. Find the line between economical and shoddy and walk it carefully. I'll revise the plan, he said. Get you new numbers by tomorrow. Thank you. She looked like she wanted to say more, but couldn't figure out how. Ethan understood that feeling. He'd been carrying around words he couldn't say for 3 years. I should get back out there, he said. Yeah, okay. He turned to leave, made it to the door before she spoke again. Ethan? He looked back. Are you married? The question hit him like cold water. She'd asked before in a roundabout way, but this was direct, unmistakable. No, he said. But you were. Yeah. And she's gone. 3 years. Vivian nodded slowly, processing that. Do you still love her? The question should have made him angry, should have felt like an invasion. But coming from Vivian, standing in her kitchen with papers spread across the table like evidence of her own slow-motion disaster, it just felt honest. Yeah, he said. I do. Probably always will. That's not what I asked, though. Not really. Ethan frowned. Then what are you asking? I'm asking if there's room for anything else, anyone else. She was looking at him steadily now, no hesitation. Because I like you. And I think maybe you like me, and I'm trying to figure out if that matters or if I'm just reading things that aren't there. Ethan's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. He should tell her the truth, that he didn't have room, that his life was already too full with work and Mia and grief, that adding someone else would be too much, too complicated, too risky. But that wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was messier. The whole truth was that he'd been thinking about her at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep, that he looked forward to seeing her truck in the driveway when he showed up for work, that when that beam had fallen and she'd pulled him to safety, he'd felt something shift inside him that he'd thought was permanently frozen. I don't know, he said finally. I don't know if there's room. I don't know what that would even look like. And I don't know if I'm ready to find out. That's honest. It's all I've got right now. Vivian smiled, sad and understanding. Okay, that's enough. Is it? For now. Ask me again when we're not both drowning. Ethan nodded and left before he could say something he'd regret, or before he could say something he wouldn't regret, which somehow felt more dangerous. That night, he sat in his kitchen long after Mia had gone to bed, staring at his phone. Vivian's number was right there. He could text her, could say something about the conversation or about the barn, or about any of the 100 things spinning through his head. But he didn't. Because once he started, he wouldn't know how to stop. And he wasn't sure he was ready for whatever came after that. The next morning, Ethan showed up with revised plans and a headache from staying up too late working numbers. Vivian met him at the barn with coffee and dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept much either. They didn't talk about the conversation in the kitchen, just went straight to business, spreading the new blueprints across the hood of his truck while Marcus and the crew started unloading materials. So this is the scaled-back version? Vivian asked, studying the drawings. Yeah, same structural integrity, less finishing work. We use cheaper siding, skip the custom trim, go with standard fixtures instead of trying to match the originals. How much does that save? About 22,000, puts us at 78 total. Vivian was quiet for a moment, doing math in her head. I can make that work. Barely. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She pointed to a section of the plan. What about this? The loft. We're rebuilding it, just not with the original materials, pine instead of oak. It'll hold weight fine, just won't last as long. How long? 30 years instead of 90. I'll take it. She looked up at him. When can we start? Today. But Vivian, if the bank changes the loan terms, I'll deal with the bank. You deal with the barn. Marcus wandered over, tool belt slung low on his hips. We doing this or what? I'm freezing my ass off out here. We're doing it, Vivian said. Good. Kyle already started pulling out the old loft. Kid's got energy, I'll give him that. They worked through the morning without stopping. The temperature stayed below zero, which meant the wood was brittle and the metal tools burned to touch even through gloves. Ethan's fingers went numb twice. The second time, Vivian noticed him trying to warm them against his coffee mug and dragged him inside. You're going to give yourself frostbite, she said, pushing him toward the space heater in the living room. I'm fine. You can't even hold a hammer. Sit. He sat, mostly because arguing took energy he didn't have. Vivian disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a bowl of warm water. Put your hands in this. That's going to hurt. That's how you know it's working. She was right. The water felt like fire against his skin. He hissed through his teeth and tried to pull away, but Vivian held the bowl steady. Keep them in. Don't be a baby. Easy for you to say. I did this exact thing last week. You think I'm out here in heated gloves? I can't afford heated gloves. Ethan looked at her. You're a billionaire. On paper. In reality, I'm a woman with a lot of theoretical money and very little actual cash. She set the bowl on the coffee table. Most of what I have is tied up in investments my father made before he died. Smart investments, long-term stuff that'll pay off in 20 years. Doesn't help me much now. Can't you pull it out? Not without penalties that would cost more than I'd gain, and the trust managers would fight me on it anyway. She sat back, wrapping her hands around her own coffee mug. My father was brilliant with money, just didn't account for me being stubborn enough to try saving this place. Would he have wanted you to? Vivian considered that. I don't know, maybe. He loved this property, but he was also practical. He might have told me to let it go. But you can't. No, I can't. She looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. That makes me stupid, doesn't it? No. It makes you loyal. Same thing sometimes. They sat in silence while the feeling came back into Ethan's hands. Outside, he could hear the crew working, the rhythmic sound of hammers and saws cutting through the cold air. Can I ask you something? Vivian said. Sure. Why do you do this? The restoration work. It seems like it'd be easier to just build new things instead of trying to save old ones. Ethan flexed his fingers, testing them. The numbness was fading, replaced by pins and needles. You ever try to build something from scratch? No? It's boring. Everything's uniform, predictable. You follow the plans, use the standard materials, and at the end you've got something that looks like every other building that's ever been built. He picked up his coffee, took a sip. But old buildings? They've got character, flaws, things that don't make sense until you figure out the story behind them. Like why there's a beam in the middle of a doorway, or why the floor slopes toward the east wall. Every building is a puzzle, and solving it means understanding the people who built it. You like the challenge. I like the history, the connection to something bigger than me. He set the mug down. My grandfather was a carpenter, built houses in the 50s and 60s before everything went to prefab and particle board. He taught me that good work lasts, that if you do something right, it outlives you. Is he still alive? No, died when I was 20. I'm sorry. It's okay. He lived a good life, did work that mattered. Ethan looked down at his hands. I guess I'm trying to do the same thing. Leave something behind that's worth leaving. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You're a better person than you give yourself credit for. I'm just doing a job. No, you're saving something that matters to someone you barely know. That's more than a job. Before Ethan could respond, the front door burst open and Mia came running in, her cheeks red from the cold. Dad, Miss Cross, you have to come see what we found. Ethan stood up. What did you find? A whole room under the barn. Come on. She ran back out before either of them could ask questions. Ethan and Vivian exchanged a glance, then followed. Kyle was standing by the north corner of the barn, pointing down at a section of floor they'd pulled up. We were checking the foundation and found this. Ethan knelt down, shining his flashlight into the gap. Below the floorboards was a space maybe 4 feet high, running the length of the north wall. It looked hand-dug, the walls reinforced with old timber and stone. What is that? Vivian asked, crouching beside him. Root cellar, maybe? Or a storm shelter? Ethan angled the flashlight, trying to see deeper. Looks old. Might be original to the property. Can we go down there? Not until we make sure it's stable. Could be collapsed sections, bad air, who knows what. He stood up, brushing off his knees. But yeah, we should check it out. Might be structural issues we need to address. Marcus had wandered over, looking interested. Want me to rig up some lights? Yeah, and bring the air monitor. I don't want anyone going down there until we know it's safe. It took an hour to get everything set up. They lowered a work light into the space, tested the air quality, made sure there weren't any immediate collapse risks. Then Ethan climbed down, moving carefully, aware that one wrong step could bring the whole thing down on his head. The space was bigger than it had looked from above. Maybe 8 feet wide, 20 feet long, with a dirt floor and walls that had been meticulously shored up with hand-hewn timbers. There were shelves built into the walls, most of them empty, but on one he found a rusted coffee can and what looked like the remains of an old newspaper. What's down there? Vivian called from above. Storage, looks like. Might have been used during the Depression. He picked up the coffee can carefully. It rattled. Found something. He brought it up, and they gathered around while he pried off the lid. Inside were coins, old pennies and nickels, some from the 30s and 40s. And underneath them, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small leather journal. Vivian took it with shaking hands, opening it carefully. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the handwriting spidery and faded. It's my great-grandfather's, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Look, James Cross, 1932. Mia crowded in, trying to see. What does it say? Vivian turned the pages slowly, scanning the entries. It's a work log. Lists what he did each day, planting schedules, weather notes, expenses. She stopped on a page near the middle, her expression shifting. Oh. What? Ethan asked. Listen to this. July 15th, 1932. Finished the barn today with help from the Holloways, the Pratts, and Tom Donovan. 17 men and boys turned out. Could not have done it alone. This land is bigger than one family. Need to remember that. She looked up, her eyes bright. He built this with the community. It wasn't just him. That's how they did it back then, Marcus said. Barn raisings. Everybody helped everybody else. Vivian closed the journal carefully, holding it like it might break. We should do that. Do what? Ethan asked. Ask for help. From the community. She looked at him, then at Marcus, then back at the barn. My father knew everyone around here. They came to his funeral, brought food for weeks afterward. What if we asked them to help finish this? Vivian, this isn't 1932. People don't just show up to help anymore. How do you know? We haven't asked. Marcus scratched his beard, considering. She's got a point. There's still folks around here who remember your dad. Might be willing to pitch in. Doing what? Danny asked. Most people don't know construction. They don't need to. We need basic labor. Hauling materials, cleaning up, holding boards steady. Things that don't require specialized skills. Vivian was getting excited now, talking faster. We could organize it, a weekend event, bring food, make it a community thing. Ethan wanted to say no. Wanted to explain that professional construction wasn't something you could crowdsource. That having untrained people on site was a liability. That this was a terrible idea for about 15 different reasons. But then he looked at Vivian's face, at the hope there, and found himself saying, we'd need insurance and waivers, and someone would have to coordinate everything. I can do that. I'll make calls, send emails, post on social media. We've got 3 weeks until the next phase. That's enough time to organize something, right? Maybe. So we try. Worst case, nobody shows up and we keep doing it ourselves. Best case, we get help and save time and money. She looked at Marcus. What do you think? Marcus shrugged. I've seen stranger things work, but you'll need to be clear about expectations. This isn't a party. It's work. I can do that. And you'll need to feed people. Nobody works for free, but they'll work for food. I can do that too. Ethan could see he was outnumbered. Fine, but I'm in charge of what tasks get assigned. I'm not having someone's uncle fall off a ladder because nobody told him what he was doing. Deal. Vivian stuck out her hand and Ethan shook it, feeling like he'd just agreed to something that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Vivian threw herself into organizing with the same intensity she'd brought to everything else. She called everyone her father had ever known, posted about the barn raising on every social media platform, reached out to the local paper to run a story. Ethan focused on the work, keeping the crew moving forward while mentally cataloging all the tasks they could delegate to volunteers. Mia appointed herself Vivian's assistant, which mostly meant following her around and asking questions about everything. Ethan watched his daughter fall into an easy rhythm with Vivian, the two of them laughing over something at the kitchen table while Ethan and Marcus worked on the roof. She's good with kids, Marcus observed. Yeah. Mia seems happy here. She's always happy. She's 8. You know what I mean. Ethan did know. Mia had been quieter since Sarah died, more careful, like she was afraid of taking up too much space. But here, with Vivian, she was louder, brighter, more like the kid she used to be. It made something in Ethan's chest ache. On Friday, 2 days before the community event, Vivian came out to the barn looking worried. The bank called, she said without preamble. Ethan set down his hammer. And? They want to meet next week to discuss the situation. She made air quotes around the last part, which I'm pretty sure is code for we're calling the loan. Can they do that? If they think the collateral value has dropped too much, yeah, they can require additional guarantees or restructure the terms, which you can't meet, which I can't meet. Vivian wrapped her arms around herself. I've got maybe 30 days before this all falls apart, maybe less. Marcus had stopped working, listening. What about the trust money? Still locked up. My lawyer's trying to petition for early release, but that could take months. So what are you going to do? Danny asked. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she squared her shoulders and said, What I came here to do, finish the barn. If the bank takes it, at least it'll be standing when they do. That's not a plan, Ethan said. It's the only plan I've got. She walked back to the house, leaving them standing in uncomfortable silence. She's going to lose everything, Kyle said quietly. Maybe, Marcus said. Maybe not. People have pulled off bigger miracles. But his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of day where the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. Ethan showed up at dawn, expecting to find the property empty except for the crew. Instead, he found a dozen trucks already parked in the driveway. He climbed out slowly, not quite believing what he was seeing. People were everywhere, unloading tools from truck beds, carrying coffee thermoses, gathering in small groups and talking. He recognized a few faces from town, but most were strangers. Vivian was in the middle of it all, directing traffic, a clipboard in one hand and a megaphone in the other. Morning, she called out when she saw him. Hope you're ready. How many people are coming? Last count, 67. Could be more. 67. Your crew handles the technical stuff. Everyone else does basic labor. I've got them organized into teams. Ethan looked at the crowd, then at the barn, then back at Vivian. You're serious? As a heart attack. Marcus arrived, took one look at the situation, and started laughing. Well, this is going to be interesting. It was more than interesting. It was organized chaos. Vivian had divided people into groups. One for cleanup, one for hauling materials, one for painting, one for basic carpentry under supervision. She'd set up a food station near the house where women Ethan didn't know were already unpacking casseroles and setting up coffee urns. By 8 o'clock, the work was in full swing. Ethan moved between groups, answering questions, correcting mistakes, making sure nobody was doing anything dangerous. It was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. Around noon, an old man with white hair and calloused hands approached him. "You Ethan Vale?" "That's me." "Jim Holloway. My father helped build this barn back in '32. He looked up at the structure, squinting against the sun. "Looks good. Better than I expected, honestly. We're getting there. James Cross was a good man. Best neighbor my family ever had." Jim turned to Ethan. "You take care of his daughter, you hear? She's doing something important here. I'm just the contractor." "Son, I've been around long enough to know when someone's just a contractor and when there's something more. You're something more." Before Ethan could respond, Jim walked away to join a group carrying lumber. The day blurred into a mess of activity. People worked, broke for lunch, worked some more. Kids ran around the property, supervised by parents who kept one eye on them and one eye on their tasks. Someone brought a guitar and started playing during the break, and someone else started singing, and before long there was an impromptu concert happening in the yard. Ethan found Vivian standing by the barn, watching it all with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You okay?" he asked. My father would have loved this. Her voice was thick. "All these people working together, this is exactly what he wanted." "You did good. We're not finished yet." "No, but we're getting there." She looked at him, and something passed between them that felt important, though Ethan couldn't have named it if asked. "Thank you," she said, "for not telling me I was crazy." "You are crazy, but sometimes that's not a bad thing." She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. They worked until dark. By the time the last truck pulled away, they'd made more progress than Ethan had thought possible. The roof was nearly finished. The west wall was up and secured. The loft framing was complete. They weren't done, but they were close enough that Ethan could see the finish line. The crew left, exhausted and satisfied. Ethan stayed behind, doing one last walkthrough to make sure everything was secure. He found Vivian sitting on the porch steps, staring at the barn. "It's going to be okay," he said, sitting beside her. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and Ethan went very still, not wanting to move and break whatever this was. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Of losing the property? Of failing him? My dad. He trusted me with this, and I'm going to lose it to the bank. You haven't lost it yet. But I will. Even if we finish the barn, I can't make the payments they're going to demand." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. So he just sat there, letting her lean against him, watching the barn stand dark and solid against the night sky. After a while, Vivian said, "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "What happened in the kitchen the other day, when I asked about you and me? Did I make things weird?" "A little. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm not good at this." "Haven't been for a while." "At what?" "Letting people in. Being close to someone. I built walls after Sarah died, and I don't know how to take them down." Vivian lifted her head, looking at him. "Maybe you don't have to take them all down at once. Maybe you just take down one brick at a time." "Is that what you did? After your mom?" "No. I ran away to New York and pretended I was fine for 6 years. Turns out that doesn't work very well." Ethan laughed despite himself. "So we're both bad at this." "Spectacularly bad." They sat in silence again, comfortable this time. Then Vivian said, "For what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for." "How do you figure?" "You're here, sitting on these steps with me instead of running away. That's something." "Maybe." "Definitely." She stood up, brushing off her jeans. "I should get inside. Early day tomorrow." "Yeah, me too." But neither of them moved. They just stood there, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth coming off her, far enough that there was still space between them. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." He watched her walk into the house, then climbed into his truck and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. One brick at a time, she'd said. Maybe that was possible. Maybe. The meeting with the bank was scheduled for Tuesday at 10. Vivian spent Monday night going over numbers that refused to add up no matter how many times she ran them. Ethan knew because she texted him at 11:30 asking about final costs, then again at 1:15 with a question about the timeline, and finally at 2:47 with just a question mark, which he figured didn't need answering. He showed up at the property at 7 the next morning, earlier than usual, and found her sitting in the barn, not working, just sitting on an overturned crate, staring at the walls they'd spent weeks rebuilding. "You're here early," she said without looking at him. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep." "I noticed." She finally turned to face him, and the exhaustion there hit him like a physical thing. "I don't know what I'm going to tell them. The bank. I've run every scenario and they all end the same way." "Which is?" "Me losing this place." She stood up, brushing sawdust off her jeans. "The barn's almost done, but I can't make the new payment structure they're going to demand. Even if I liquidate everything I can touch, I'm still short." "How short?" 30,000. Might as well be 30 million. Ethan leaned against the wall they'd reinforced 3 weeks ago. It was solid now, straight, the kind of work that would last. What if we bought more time? How? Finish the barn completely. Get it operational. Show the bank it's a functional business property, not just a restoration project. That changes the valuation. "Ethan, we're weeks away from that. The meeting's in 3 hours. Then we don't finish everything. We finish enough. Make it look operational even if it's not quite ready." He pulled out his phone, checking the time. "Call the bank. Tell them you need to reschedule. Family emergency, whatever. Buy us a week." "They're not going to like that." "Do they have to like it?" Vivian almost smiled. "No, I guess they don't." She made the call while Ethan started mentally cataloging everything they'd need to do. The bank gave her pushback, but she held firm, and eventually they agreed to the following Tuesday. 7 days. Marcus showed up while Vivian was still on the phone, took one look at Ethan's face, and said, "What are we doing?" "Finishing this. We've got 2 weeks of work left, minimum. We've got 7 days, so we prioritize. What absolutely has to be done to make this place look operational?" Marcus thought about it. "Roof finished, interior cleaned and painted, stalls built, basic lighting and power, signage. Can we do that in a week? If we don't sleep, maybe. Then we don't sleep." Vivian ended her call and walked over. "They gave me until next Tuesday. 1 week extension, and they made it very clear that's all I'm getting." "Then we make it count," Ethan said. "Marcus, call everyone. Tell them we need all hands for the next 7 days. Danny, Kyle, Aaron, anyone who can spare the time." "What about the community folks?" Ethan hesitated. Volunteers were great for basic labor, but what they needed now was speed and precision. "We can't coordinate that many people on this timeline. This needs to be the core crew." "I can help," Vivian said. "Whatever you need." "You're going to." He looked at her. "This is going to get intense. Long hours, probably some mistakes, definitely some frustration. You still in?" "Where else would I be?" The next 7 days blurred together into one continuous stretch of work punctuated by brief intervals of sleep and food. The crew showed up before dawn and worked past dark, running on coffee and stubbornness. Ethan pushed them hard, pushed himself harder, aware that every hour they lost was an hour they couldn't get back. Mia spent the week with Mrs. Chen, which killed Ethan a little bit. He called her every night, listened to her talk about school and her friends and the project she was building for science class, and tried not to let her hear how tired he was. On the 3rd night, she said, "Are you going to finish in time?" "I don't know, kiddo. We're trying." "Ms. Cross sounds really worried." "How do you know that?" "She texted me yesterday, asked if I wanted to come visit when things calmed down." Ethan sat up straighter. "She has your number?" "You gave it to her, remember, in case of emergencies." He had done that back when Mia had started spending time at the property. He just hadn't expected Vivian to actually use it. "What did you tell her?" he asked. "That I'd like to visit, and that you were working really hard to help her." Mia was quiet for a second. "Dad, do you like her?" "Mia, I know you said she's just a client, but you're not acting like she's just a client." "How am I acting?" "Different, less sad." Another pause. "I think Mom would want you to be less sad." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, maybe she would." "So it's okay. If you like her, I'm just saying." "I know what you're saying." "Okay. Good." Mia yawned. "I gotta go. Mrs. Chen made cookies. Save me one. No promises." She hung up, leaving Ethan sitting alone in his truck outside the property, staring at the barn lit up by work lights, trying to figure out when his 8-year-old daughter had become smarter than him. By Friday, they were ahead of schedule. The roof was finished, the interior was painted, and Kyle had spent 2 days building stalls that actually looked professional. The electrical work was done, the lighting installed, and Marcus had somehow convinced a friend to donate a sign that read Cross Creek Stables in letters big enough to see from the road. "Where'd you get this?" Ethan asked, running his hand over the carved wood. "Guy owed me a favor, called it in." Marcus stepped back, admiring his work. "Looks good, doesn't it?" "Yeah, it really does." They hung it above the main entrance, and Vivian came out to see it. She stood there for a long moment, not saying anything, and when she finally turned around, her eyes were wet. "He would have loved this," she said. "We're not done yet," Ethan said. "I know, but we're close." That night, after everyone else had left, Ethan found Vivian in the barn arranging hay bales in the stalls they'd just built. She was moving slowly, deliberately, like she was trying to memorize every detail. "You should get some rest," he said. "Can't. Too much to do." "Vivian, we're on track. The barn's going to be ready." "The barn, yeah, but I'm still 30,000 short on the payment." She sat down on one of the bales, looking exhausted. "Even if they approve the new valuation, even if everything goes perfectly, I don't have enough." Ethan sat beside her. "What about the trust?" "My lawyer called today. The petition was denied. Earliest I can access that money is 18 months from now." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Turns out my father was really thorough about protecting me from my own bad decisions. Saving this place isn't a bad decision." The trust managers disagree. They think I'm being emotional and impractical. She looked at him. "Are they right?" "Probably. But that doesn't mean you're wrong." "How does that work?" "Some of the best things people do are emotional and impractical. That's what makes them worth doing." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to lose this. Even with everything we've done, I'm going to lose it." "You don't know that. I know math, and the math doesn't work." Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that something would work out, but he'd spent his entire adult life dealing with structural realities, and he knew when a problem didn't have a solution. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "That we couldn't fix it, that all this work might not be enough." "You did fix it. The barn's standing. It's beautiful. It's everything my father wanted." She leaned her head on his shoulder again, the gesture becoming familiar. "If the bank takes it, at least it'll be standing when they do. That matters." They sat in silence, surrounded by fresh paint and new wood and the smell of sawdust. Outside, the February wind rattled the walls, but they held solid. "Can I tell you something?" Vivian said. "Sure." "I'm glad you took this job. Even if it all falls apart, I'm glad I met you." Ethan's chest felt tight. "Yeah, me too." "Are you still married?" The question surprised him. "What?" "In your head, in your heart. Are you still married to her?" Ethan thought about it, really thought about it, instead of giving the automatic answer he'd been giving for 3 years. "No," he said finally. "I'll always love her. She'll always be Mia's mom. But I'm not married anymore. I'm just here, trying to figure out what comes next." "Have you figured it out yet?" "No, but I'm starting to think maybe that's okay." Vivian lifted her head, looking at him. "What changed?" "You did. This place did. Watching you fight for something that matters even when everyone's telling you to quit." He met her eyes. "It reminded me that there's more to life than just getting through the day." "That's a low bar." "It's been my bar for 3 years. And now?" "Now I'm thinking maybe I can aim higher." They were sitting very close now, close enough that Ethan could count the flecks of gold in her eyes, close enough that he could feel her breath against his face. He should pull back, should maintain the professional distance he'd been clinging to since the day they met. But he didn't. Instead, he kissed her. It was brief and careful, a question more than a statement. Vivian went very still, and for a second Ethan thought he'd made a massive mistake. Then she kissed him back, and the question became an answer. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian was smiling. "Took you long enough." "I'm slow with this stuff." "I noticed." She stood up, pulling him to his feet. "Come on, we've got work to finish." "It's almost midnight." "So?" "We've got 3 days until the bank shows up. Sleep is for people who aren't trying to save family legacies." They worked through the night, cleaning and organizing and making everything as perfect as they could. Marcus showed up at dawn, took one look at them, and said, "You two didn't sleep, did you?" "Sleep is overrated," Vivian said. "That's what everyone says right before they pass out and crack their skull open. Go home, both of you. Get actual rest. We've got this." Ethan wanted to argue, but Marcus was right. He was running on fumes, and from the way Vivian was swaying slightly, she was too. 4 hours, he conceded. Then we're back. 8 hours. I'm not having you collapse on site. Insurance won't cover it. They left Marcus in charge and drove their separate vehicles back toward town. Ethan made it to his driveway and sat there for a minute, too tired to move. His phone buzzed. "Vivian, you okay?" Ethan, "Yeah, you?" Vivian, "Terrified, excited, exhausted, all of it." Ethan, "Same." Vivian, "Thank you for everything." Ethan, "Don't thank me yet." Vivian, "I'm thanking you now anyway. See you in 8 hours." He went inside, collapsed on the couch without taking off his boots, and was asleep before his head hit the cushion. The weekend brought another wave of community volunteers. Word had spread about the bank deadline, and people showed up wanting to help. They painted fences, cleared debris, planted early spring flowers along the driveway. Someone donated a weather vane shaped like a horse, and Kyle's brother spent an afternoon installing it on the barn's highest point. By Monday night, the property looked transformed. The barn stood straight and solid, fresh white paint gleaming in the late winter sun. The pasture fence was repaired. The driveway was graded smooth. It looked like a real business, like something with a future. Vivian walked the property at dusk, and Ethan followed at a distance, watching her take it all in. "It's perfect," she said when he caught up to her. "It's pretty good." "No, it's perfect." She turned to face him. "Tomorrow the bank's going to tell me I can't keep it, but tonight, right now, it's perfect." "Vivian, I know, I'm trying to be realistic, but can I just have tonight to pretend it worked?" Ethan pulled her close, and she wrapped her arms around him, and they stood there in the fading light, holding on to something that might not survive the morning. Tuesday arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. The bank assessors showed up at 10 sharp, 3 of them in suits that cost more than Ethan's truck. Vivian met them in business clothes she must have borrowed from her New York life, looking professional and terrified in equal measure. Ethan stayed in the barn with the crew, pretending to work, while actually listening to every word through the open door. The assessors walked the property, taking notes, asking questions. Vivian answered calmly, showing them the operational plan, the financial projections, the community support documentation. They spent 40 minutes inspecting every detail, their faces giving nothing away. Finally, they gathered in front of the barn. The lead assessor, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, looked at her tablet, then at Vivian. "Ms. Cross, I'll be direct. When we assessed this property in January, it was valued at 42% of the original loan amount. Based on what we're seeing today, that valuation needs to be revised upward." Vivian went very still. "Upward?" "The structure is sound, the business plan is viable, the community support is documented and substantial." The woman almost smiled. "Frankly, this is one of the better restoration projects I've seen. The new valuation is 87% of the loan amount, which means we're recommending the loan be restructured rather than called. You'll still need to make payments, but the terms will be adjusted to reflect the improved collateral value." Vivian swayed slightly. Ethan started forward, but she caught herself. "What about the payment I can't make?" she asked. "The $30,000. The assessor looked at her colleagues, then back at Vivian. "The restructure includes a 90-day grace period. No payments during that time. After that, new monthly amounts based on the revised valuation." "How much?" The woman told her. Ethan couldn't hear the exact number, but he could see Vivian's face, could see the moment she realized it was manageable. "I can do that," Vivian said. "I can make that work." "Then we'll start the paperwork. You should have everything finalized within 2 weeks." The assessors left, their expensive cars kicking up gravel. Vivian stood in the driveway, not moving, barely breathing. Then she turned, saw Ethan standing in the barn doorway, and ran. He caught her, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, and he was holding her so tight he was probably hurting her, but she didn't complain. "We did it," she said into his shoulder. "We actually did it." "You did it." "No, we did." She pulled back, looking at him. I couldn't have done this without you, without all of you. Marcus and the crew had gathered, and they were all grinning like idiots. Danny started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, and Ethan felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Actual, real hope. The celebration lasted through the afternoon. People heard the news and showed up with food and drinks and congratulations. Someone brought a speaker and started playing music. Kids ran through the property chasing each other, and adults stood in small groups talking and laughing. Ethan found himself standing with Jim Holloway, the old man whose father had helped build the original barn. This is good, Jim said, looking around. This is what James wanted, community, connection, something bigger than one person. Vivian made it happen. You helped. Don't sell yourself short. Jim looked at him. My wife died 11 years ago, cancer. I spent 5 years after that just existing, not living, just existing. What changed? I realized she wouldn't have wanted that. Wouldn't have wanted me to stop living just because she was gone. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Your wife wouldn't want it either. Whatever you had, whatever you lost, she'd want you to keep going, to find something good again. Ethan's throat was tight. How do you know? Because anyone who loved you enough to leave a hole that big would love you enough to want you to fill it. Jim walked away before Ethan could respond, leaving him standing alone with thoughts that felt too big for his head. Mia showed up around 5, Mrs. Chen dropping her off with an apology about needing to leave early. She ran straight to Vivian, who scooped her up and spun her around despite being exhausted. We did it! Mia shrieked. We did! Does this mean you get to keep the barn? It means I get to keep the barn. And can we get horses now? Soon, very soon. Mia wiggled free and ran to Ethan. Dad, did you hear? We saved it. I heard. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. He looked at his daughter, then at Vivian, then at the barn standing solid and straight against the winter sky. Yeah, he said. I think I am. As the sun set, people started leaving. They hugged Vivian, congratulated her again, promised to come back when the horses arrived. Slowly, the property emptied until it was just Ethan, Vivian, and Mia. They sat on the porch steps, watching the last light fade from the sky. Mia was between them, leaning against Vivian, almost asleep. What happens now? Vivian asked. Now you run a stable, Ethan said. Find horses, hire staff, advertise for students. That's terrifying. You'll be great at it. How do you know? Because you were great at this, and this was harder. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Will you still come around after the work's done? Do you want me to? Yeah, I really do. Mia made a sleepy sound that might have been approval. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Vivian, then at the property they'd spent weeks saving. The work's never really done, he said. Places like this, they always need something. Maintenance, repairs, improvements. So you're saying you'll be around? I'm saying I could be, if you wanted. I want. They sat in comfortable silence until Mia was fully asleep. Ethan picked her up carefully, and she curled against his chest, the way she had when she was small. I should get her home, he said. Yeah. But neither of them moved for a moment, just stood there, close together, Mia breathing softly between them. Ethan? Vivian said. Yeah? Are you still married? He smiled. No, I'm not married anymore. Good. Because I was thinking maybe we could have dinner sometime, like a real date. Not just grabbing food between construction projects. I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah. He carried Mia to the truck, got her buckled in. When he turned back, Vivian was standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the porch light. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He drove home through the dark, Mia asleep beside him, thinking about everything that had changed in the past 2 months. He'd come out here expecting another painful job, another owner desperate for miracles he couldn't provide. Instead, he'd found something he hadn't known he was looking for. A second chance. Not to replace what he'd lost, but to build something new alongside it. When spring finally arrived 6 weeks later, it came all at once the way it did in Montana. Snow melting, grass growing, everything turning green overnight. The first horses arrived on a Saturday in late March. 2 gentle mares named Copper and Sage that Vivian had rescued from a farm going out of business. Ethan brought Mia to see them, and she spent an hour feeding them carrots and asking a million questions while Vivian explained everything with infinite patience. The community writing program started in April. Local kids showed up twice a week for lessons, and Vivian hired a retired writing instructor named Margaret, who ran the sessions with the kind of stern kindness that made kids behave and try harder at the same time. Ethan finished the last of the construction work in May, a small addition to the barn that would serve as an office and tack room. It was smaller than the original plan, simpler, but it worked, just like everything else they'd done. On the last day of work, Marcus helped him pack up the tools. "So that's it?" Marcus said. "For now. I'm sure something else will break eventually. And you'll come fix it." "Yeah, I will." Marcus grinned. "You're gone on her. It's embarrassing to watch." "Shut up. I'm just saying, about time you found something besides work and worry." "I've got Mia." "You know what I mean." Marcus closed the toolbox with a snap. "Sarah would have liked her. Vivian. She would have approved." Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah, I think she would have." They finished loading the truck, and Ethan went to find Vivian. She was in the barn with the horses, talking to them while she brushed their coats. She did that sometimes, just talked to them like they understood. Maybe they did. "Hey," he said. She looked up, smiling. "Hey, all done." "All done. So what now?" "Now you run this place and I go find other buildings to fix." "That's it?" "Well, there's also the part where I take you to dinner on Friday, if the offer still stands." "The offer definitely still stands." He walked closer and Copper nudged his shoulder, looking for treats he didn't have. "I was thinking we could bring Mia. Make it a real thing, not hiding it or pretending it's something else." "I'd like that. She's good company." "She likes you, a lot." "The feeling's mutual." Ethan took Vivian's hand, lacing their fingers together. It felt natural now, easy in a way he'd forgotten things could be. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For asking if I was married. For not letting me hide behind that forever." "You weren't hiding. You were healing." "Maybe. But I'm done now. With the healing, with the hiding, all of it." He pulled her closer. "I'm ready for whatever comes next. Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy." She kissed him, and Copper made an indignant sound at being ignored, and they both laughed without breaking apart. Later, when Ethan drove away from the property, for what was technically the last time as contractor, he looked in the rearview mirror at the barn standing solid against the sky. The sign caught the late afternoon light, Cross Creek Stables. It had been worth it. Every frozen morning, every aching muscle, every moment of doubt. Because some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were bad and the costs were high. Some things, some people, were worth the risk of trying again. Mia looked up from her phone. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Are you and Miss Cross going to get married?" Ethan nearly drove off the road. "What? No, we just started dating. Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering. You look at her the way you used to look at Mom." His hands tightened on the wheel. "That's not... it's different." "Different isn't bad. It's just different." Mia went back to her phone. "I think it'd be okay. If you did. Someday. Good to know I have your permission." "You're welcome." They drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and Ethan thought about the barn they'd saved, the community they'd brought together, the second chances that came when you least expected them. Life didn't always give you what you planned for. Sometimes it took things away and left holes so big you thought you'd never fill them. But sometimes, if you were lucky, it gave you something new, something different, something worth building. And sometimes that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.